Hey, what's going on, everyone? Back with another knife overview. Today we're going to be looking at the Tactile Archer. And before I get started, huge shout out to my buddy Ryan. He let me borrow this Archer, and I'm really appreciative of that. This is the pouch that it comes with. Really nice, good branding. I like that they put a little lanyard on the zipper pull there. Pretty normal fare for Tactile. The details on this knife, so it features a 3.4-inch blade. Closed, you're looking at 4.7 inches. The OAL, or overall length, is 8.1 inches. This is running on a 2-row bearing system, so 18 bearings per side. That's really nice. The steel is going to be MagnaCut. It weighs 4.5 ounces. Features titanium scales. The pocket clips titanium. The back spacers titanium. This is made in Texas, USA, and interestingly enough, so this is going to be designed by TJ Schwartz, which I thought it was funny when I sent a picture of this to my buddy Zach. He said, "Hey, that looks like a Koenig Arius," and it's like, well, it's not a Koenig Arius, but it is actually designed by the same guy that designed the Arius, so that's pretty cool. The MSRP of this is going to be $599. So before we get started in my overview observations, we'll do a few quick size comparisons. So the Archer as compared to a large Sebenza 31. And we have a Something Obscene J-Cape 3.5. Looks like that. And then bottom of the barrel here, Spyderco Yohimbo. Looks like that. Pretty much the exact same overall length. Surprising. And finally, a Spyderco Shaman. As a little aside, it's kind of funny. So I do these videos when I make them in like the shed on my property, and I have like way more Spydercos than I even know that I own. So I keep finding random Spydercos and use them for size comparisons. But with that, we'll get into my overview and observations of the Tactile Archer. So my first observation of this knife, and realizing that, I don't know, I haven't bought or sold many knives recently, and honestly nothing's really caught my eye. But when I first saw this, it reminded me of Shirogorov, like Quantum, or even a Quantum Ursus, just the shape and then what it feels like in your hand. Very close to that. But I think what's really cool about this is it is completely made in the US, which, in this day and age, that's pretty cool. Most knives we see by US manufacturers are, shipped overseas. They design them in the US, but then they make them overseas. And, this one's going to be made in Texas, apparently right outside of Dallas. Getting on Tactile's website, so this is self-described as a hyper knife, which according to their definition, so it uses all their skills and machines that they have at their disposal and then taking it a step above that. So, I think the point of this knife was to really, I guess Tactile got some new machines in their shop. They really wanted to put all of their, skills and machines to use for one blade, and the result was this Archer. My first observation was that this has a very skinny profile to it, and that's most readily apparent with this lock bar. I'm sure that it's robust enough, but it does feel a bit thin compared to what I'm used to. Like if you look at the lock bar here as compared to, again, realizing the idea of a Sebenza is older than dirt. It's about half the thickness of the lock bar on a Sebenza, and these are both frame locks, so I don't know, it's a little bit it was a little bit counterintuitive for me, and but I think on the whole this knife is just very, very skinny. And I'll try to stand it up as compared to, again, everyone pretty much knows about a Chris Reeve large Sebenza. There they are compared. Very, very skinny knife all around, and that was the first thing that I noticed when I picked this thing up. My next observation of the Tactile Archer was that all the hardware is on the clip side. And, I think that knives that do this, it does provide a very cool kind of clean show side look. But, when you flip it over, all of this kind of myriad of T8s you have here, The T8s that are on the frame are actually button heads, so they don't sit flush, and it kind of gives it more of an industrial look, vice like the hyper knife. When I think of like hyper knives, obviously I think of hyper cars, like a Koenigsegg or something like that. This one, it leaves a little bit to be desired with that if you're going to call it a hyper knife, but then you have these button heads sticking out. I think it just kind of looks a little bit like if that was the look they were going for, that's cool. But I think to categorize this as a hyper knife and then still have the hardware the way it is, it's a little curious. The next observation that I had was going to be the pivot here and these pivot cutouts more specifically. I'll try to grab a picture so I can better show what I'm saying. But the cutouts are kind of oblong because of the machining, and it gives the illusion that they're like cross-threaded or something. I can't really describe it, but they're definitely not even on both sides, and it looks like the pivot was just kind of jammed in there depending on the angle that you look at it. Like it's not a perfect circle because of I think it is due to the texturing or the machining on the scales, but it just looks a little bit weird to me, and it was something that once I saw it, I couldn't stop looking at it. The next observation that I had was there really is no jimping save for the backspacer to speak of. And, the jimping on the backspacer, it's okay. I wouldn't say it's like particularly useful, but, when you go to the top of the frame and then the blade, there's no jimping to speak of. And I think I would have liked to see a little bit of jimping on there. I think it would have been nice to do some sort of jimping to improve your grip. The next observation, we kind of have to talk about the blade. And, I'll definitely take a picture of this, but, when I look at the show side, the grind line is kind of straight and it sweeps up straight from there. When you flip it over onto the clip side, it kind of like bows up and it like sweeps up. So there are definitely like right from the factory, there's going to be uneven grind lines. I can't imagine that they did that on purpose. Again, it might just be the cost of doing business when you have like a hand ground knife, but I thought that was definitely curious that, we have a straight grind line up, one file swoop up, and then you come to the other side and it kind of goes in, back out, and then up. So I don't know, just be looking out for that. I don't know if anyone notices that. Obviously, I sat with this knife for quite some time and kind of not picked it apart, but I kept the price point in mind and then looked at what you were getting. So, if you have a Tactile Archer, I'd actually be interested to know if that's the case on your knife too, because it could just be relegated to this one, or it might be the style that they were going for. My next observation was going to be this through fuller, which I do think that it really makes it look quite mean. I could, however, do without the machining that they did in the fuller. I think what they were trying to do, like whether the knife is closed or open, maybe it's more apparent when the knife is closed, but they were trying to follow this kind of like leaf design that they have on the scales, which that's really cool machining. I think it's great for, if you have wet or sweaty hands, gives you a little bit more purchase, but these lines here, like they just don't make sense if you look at them. So, all of these are kind of sweeping outward from this spine like a leaf. That's what it reminds me of. But these are kind of straight up and down. And then when you flip it to the other side, they're actually swept back a little bit. So it just doesn't make any sense. Like maybe if like, is it supposed to be like an optical illusion to kind of keep the look of the frame, of the scales, in the fuller? I don't know, but honestly, I think it would look a lot cleaner without those lines because they just don't make sense to me. So I don't know. You take it or leave it. And my last observation, I really did like the lock bar cutout here, and I think it was very comfortable to use. But again, similarly to these lines, you have the machine lines that are in the fuller. They didn't do the same, like whatever you want to call it, like DPI or dots per inch, whatever, strikes per inch. It doesn't follow the pattern of the scales at all. Like it's much more coarse, which maybe they did it on purpose, but they're just straight up and down lines. So when you look at it, like if you just glanced at it, you'd say, oh yeah, that's in keeping. Like it gives you more purchase when you're actuating the lock bar. Like that's all well and good, but I just think that it would be better if, and I think they could have at this price point kind of lined it up so that these lines continued on this lock bar cutout right there. I think they could have made that happen, and it would have, again, at $600, it would have made this a little bit more appealing. Finally I have to say, like, the action is really nice. I didn't find myself using the fuller to actuate the knife, but again, this thing's running on bearings, beautiful. This flipper tab is nice, but since it is a frame lock, you have to be cognizant that your finger's not applying pressure on the detent. But it fires really nicely. No qualms about that. I think the lockup is really great. There's not much space between the scales and the blade. They did a really nice job of marrying it up, even with washers in there. But again, I think in this day and age, it's kind of funny. Like as we get more and more knives that are running on bearings, that kind of just becomes like the normal whatever. Like, I mean, when we talk about knives that are running on washers or a combination of both, then it gets interesting to get into knives actions. But I think in this day and age, like if I have a knife that's running on multi-row bearings, the action's going to be phenomenal. So what is there left to do? There's, you can look at the materials, you can look at the design, but the action's going to be pretty consistent. And that concludes my overview of the Tactile Archer. Again, huge shout out to my buddy Ryan for letting me try this thing out. Really glad to get my hands on it and kind of see what they're putting out in Tactile out of Texas. All in all, I think it's a really cool knife. I do love the fact that it is made in Texas in conjunction with a well-known knife designer. I wouldn't say it's the most comfortable or wieldy knife I've held. Again, if this was just another Chinese OEM knife, even at $200 cheaper, it would really blend into the saturated market that we have right now. The biggest impression left on me by this knife is just how skinny it is compared to my Sugarloaf Quantums that I've held. So, I think that was kind of hard to shake that comparison once I got it in my head. And just the fact that a knife with so much machine work, even in the fuller, couldn't be bothered to throw any jimping on top, which I think would have made this knife way more comfortable, and I think it really would have improved the overall package that you get. So Tactile Archer, let me know your thoughts. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We'll see you next time.